lions, tigers, and elephants. Oh my. Welcome to the live stream today. It should be a good one. Let me pop this out real quick. Oh, and you can't see the right screen. We got problems already. But we have a fun show today. There we go. Now we got the right screen. Latter-day Lion joins the program. Then we'll get into the segment called Through Elephant's Eyes. That's where we look at lived experiences that have happened recently, which in this case is going to be going through the lessons learned from Ex-Mormon Subreddit. You'll want to tune in. Then we'll get into Trunk Treasures, the hidden gems on the internet. Particularly, we'll look at comments, what people are saying, shocking reactions. You won't want to miss it. And then Big Ears Bulletin, what's breaking news? Something's going on with 132 Problems YouTube channel. And there's an article going around about from the Salt Lake Tribune about someone who has resigned from the church. That's an article that we'll talk about coming up. But first, the one and only Latter-day Lion. How's it going?
Doing all right. I'm having a lot of fun so far. This is great.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. Latter-day Lion, where'd you come up with that name? And what are you? Yeah, is that like a Chat GPT? I need a name for my YouTube channel.
No, it's not. So I got my start in kind of the social media apologetic space on TikTok. Actually, I went under a different username.
Okay.
J Golden Shadow for a while. Unfortunately, after a while, I started noticing a bit of a pattern that there, especially on TikTok, there were a lot of people who would take old general authorities or things like that, and it would be exclusively anti-Mormon, ex-Mormon channels. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to be associated with that. So I am a writer by trade. And so it's not necessarily difficult for me to come up with things like, I need something else. And I have a bit of a reputation, shall we say, on TikTok.
Good, bad? Oh. And
so I leaned into it.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you cut out for everyone else, but you kind of cut out there for a second. But
this is kind of an issue for me. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Utah. So
I like nowhere, Utah. It's a great place.
Yeah, but sometimes rural internet gets the best of me.
And welcome everyone who's joining in on the chat. I see Anticipating Christ's Return. Awesome YouTube channel. That's actually a cousin. I think we're second cousins or so. So, and we're working on something. Well, hopefully still working on something. We're collaborating on a project that I think is going to be really, really fun. But, and welcome everyone else. Curlom Theory, Through the Mist, Vex the Nation, Mike on the computer. This is going to be fun. And let's get right into it. Let's hit the first segment. This is called Through Elephant's Eye. All right. The screen share is not here. So hold on one second. Just got to switch it to here. And now it's back. Okay. So Through Elephant's Eyes. We got to talk about this video that was recently released. Okay. You might notice on the thumbnail some cleaning up I had to do with the A word. A star. Okay. So that was an actual response that someone put, one of the top ones. I didn't talk about it in the video, but I had to put it somewhere. So it ended up on the thumbnail. And I thought that one was pretty funny. So I was hanging out and I was actually at my mom's house. We were visiting down in Utah. And I was like, wait, this is a good idea. Like, what if I write something on Ex-Mormon Subreddit and just, try and get an understanding of where they think the Book of Mormon came from. But I didn't want to just go on there and just, say who I was or anything. So I was like, okay, what if I come up with some backstory, which would be much more entertaining, by the way. I put myself in the shoes of someone who just left the church. And that's what I did. So I wrote it out, got tons of responses. I did it on like a Sunday, and there's so many people on Ex-Mormon Subreddit on a Sunday. I wonder why. Yeah. And it was hilarious. Well, I don't know. It was funny. It was weird. I was disappointed. I said this in the video. I was hoping for a little something more interesting from them besides just Joseph Smith made it up. Because to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Latter-day Lion. I don't know. Should I refer to you as Latter-day Lion or should I call you your first name? Do you want your
can
first
call me
name revealed?
Monty.
Okay, Monty.
Yeah, you can call me Monty. Online in the online space, I go by Monty. There are plenty of people who go by it. It doesn't matter.
I had
Monty,
to check.
Lion, whatever.
Monty Lion. How about that? Monty Lion and the Holy Grail. Yeah. Anyway, so first, yeah, Monty, you tell me, what are your thoughts?
Oh boy.
Did you get a chance to watch the video, by the way?
I did, and honestly, a lot of these comments are absolutely hilarious. I mean, it's typical ex-Mormon fare. I mean, admittedly, a lot of the stuff we come across on TikTok all the time, right? Like, there's just so much that we look at here. Like, although I do like the AI stuff here, but the interesting thing here too is that they are honestly freely admitting, like, not, they don't know how to answer a few things, like, where did the Book of Mormon come from? Well, I don't know, I don't really know how to answer that, I don't know. It's like they're tipping their hand a lot of the time,
Well,
while still trying to say it's all false, it's all made up.
Yeah, I was gonna say they go a little bit beyond saying they don't know, which is funny because so I made a point. I wanted to make a point about the burden of proof. And we'll see later when we read some of the comments that was one of the most attacked things. Though I got to be honest, I thought this video was just going to get a bunch of hate from the ex-Mormon crowd. And it did not. Not at all. Like, I got maybe a few comments, like, because I always do, a few comments that were, like, negative from, like, antis. They were actually kind of funny. And we'll look at those coming up. But I thought, okay, when I release this, there's going to be people, like, everyone who responded to this post is going to find it and just be enraged. Be like, how could you do this? You're humiliating. I don't know. But no, like, I don't know if maybe they thought it was funny. That'd be funny. Or maybe they just had nothing to say because, like, someone was commenting, like, oh, like, kind of a little upset about it. But it's like, you guys all responded. You willingly gave your comments.
It's surprising, isn't it?
I didn't force you to respond. It's like, this is what you guys think, and you're just mad that I guess made it public. But most people weren't mad. So does that surprise you? That surprised me.
It does and it doesn't. I mean, again, I'm going based off of my experiences with a lot of the ex-Mormons on TikTok, and I mean, there's very little difference between the cesspool that is on Reddit versus the cesspool that is on TikTok. But because a lot of the same arguments are getting thrown out there all the time, especially when you, like, compare the two. I honestly wonder if there's a lot of collaboration between the two sites, to be honest. But
probably overlap in who uses.
Yeah, there probably is a lot of overlap. Admittedly, a lot of the ex-Mormons will credit Reddit for their journey outside of the church, along with the CES letter, which, surprisingly enough, actually got its start on Reddit. But yeah, I think there's a lot of issues here when it comes to, like, here's some of the things. Like, a lot of the comments that you presented in that video are like, well, wait a second, you should know this. Like, this is stuff that you should already know. And I find it fascinating that the moment someone leaves the church, they all of a sudden forget everything that they ever learned or ever, or at least they were supposed to have learned anyway. I don't know if the onus was really on them for forgetting what was taught, or whoever was supposed to have been teaching them is more on there. I want to be charitable and say it could be, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, aren't we all, like, self-teachers in some sense?
In a way, I guess, yeah.
We're supposed to study the scriptures, not just rely on someone studying it for us, I guess. But no, anyway, but there was something I was going to say. The Ex-Mormon subreddit, unfortunately, is just an echo chamber. I mean, everywhere online is actually an echo chamber. You could argue that this YouTube channel is an echo chamber, right? If you're only watching this stuff. And that's okay, but I think it kind of got exposed, at least to me, through this experiment by asking about the origins, because I was hoping to learn something I'm always interested in learning about some new theory about where the Book of Mormon came from that I hadn't heard
Right.
before. And I got to tell you, like, the responses all seem to come from people who, well, I haven't said this in the video, who have read more criticisms about the Book of Mormon than reading the book itself. Like, they spent more time
Right.
reading criticisms than the book, which is fascinating because so some people say, you know, there's different theories about where it could have been plagiarized from, right? Which is funny because I linked those in the description of the video,
Yeah.
and like Scripture Central posts those. BYU has those available for people to read because when you read them, you're like, really? And one thing that those don't have is some of like the view of the Hebrews is like the big one, right? Because it
Yeah.
has the theme of people from Israel traveling to the Americas, and that's like basically where the similarities stop.
It's either View of the Hebrews or the Spalding manuscript.
Yeah.
Those are the two that they tend to go for, and that
Yeah.
I think is absolutely hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Like all you have to do is just read them. Like you said, read
I know.
the Lost Manuscript of Solomon Spalding, read View of the Hebrews, and then compare it with the Book of Mormon. It's night and day. The only similarities there at best are surface.
Very
Like,
surface. Like
oh man.
that's what's a
And then
little
you have
frustrating.
well, and
Go
then
ahead.
you have the conspiracy theories. Like I don't know if you remember Lars Nielsen. He wrote a book a couple years ago
Oh yeah.
that was like huge in ex-Mormon circles. Like even on the back, like this book is not for TBMs. Oh, really? I'm gonna read it anyway.
Did you read it?
I did actually.
Didn't most
And
ex-Mormons come away like saying, "Okay, this is a bunch of garbage"?
it absolutely is a bunch of garbage. It's a conspiracy theory of trying to say that the Spalding theory is actually true by trying to basically make it so that this German Jesuit priest from the 1500s is somehow connected to Joseph Smith by way of the Spalding manuscript. So
Oh, okay.
the original manuscript was actually written. The Spalding manuscript was originally written by a distant relation to Joseph and Hiram named John Smith at Dartmouth College,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and who the manuscript eventually went to Solomon Spalding, who then gave the manuscript at some nebulous point in time to Sidney Rigdon, who then gave it to Parley P. Pratt, who then gave it to Joseph Smith in an occultist ways.
You cut out
Make it
there
make
for a
sense.
second.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
But I don't know if the theory would have gotten any better because
it wouldn't.
Sorry,
I mean,
like-
it doesn't make any sense. I mean, and it's hilarious. Like there are moments in there, like there are moments of dialogue between both Spalding and John Smith, the professor at Dartmouth, and then between Joseph and Sidney and several others throughout there, which Nielsen later admits, yeah, these were made up. These conversations didn't happen, but they could have.
Are you serious?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in not so many words, but that's exactly what it is. That's the exact point of that entire book, is to push this conspiracy that that Joseph Smith plagiarized the Spalding manuscript by way of Athanasius Kircher, this random German Jesuit priest, because he happened to have a Babylonian Jew in his own thing
Okay,
named
you lost
Barachius
me
Nephi.
so long ago with this. It's like, the thing is, like, even if like some of this is true, I don't know. There's so much interesting theology within the Book of Mormon
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't seen anywhere else. Like this whole idea, like it implies that we lived before we were born. It talks
Right.
about the Adam and Eve story as being a positive thing. It talks about Jesus Christ bleeding from every pore and suffering for not only our sins, but for our afflictions. It talks about the fact that God himself even follows laws. Crazy stuff. Oh, I see Word Radio's
Go
on here.
figure. Hey guys,
Which,
nice to find. Probably nice to actually put a face to this. Hey.
oh, hey, rock on, boys from Word Radio. Thank you. I'm guessing that's Cardin. If that is, he was floating the idea out there of creating his own channel as like a side thing. I hope you
Alright.
do it, Cardin, because I miss the cup of Cardin. I loved the cup of Cardin. Like when you would make that in the morning, and with that music, like this is the best day ever. When you like blur out the cup of coffee or whatever, I would jam to that while I was at the gym listening to Ward Radio. It was one of my favorite things, and it's kind of not there anymore. So if we can bring back, I voted for the Cup of Cardin. Oh, yes, it is Cardin. If we
That's
can bring
awesome.
back the Cup of Cardin, let me know what I can do to help. I know you and I are working on things. I have some things I need to get to you that I'm working on, but I would love that idea. I think I'm not the only one. So do it. And you got to keep up Ward Radio too. So obviously Ward Radio is amazing.
Channel our inner Palpatine. Do it.
Do it. or what's his name? Shia LaBeouf. Just do it.
Do it.
All right. So let's get into some of the comments because this is going to be fun. Our next segment is a trunk treasure. So let's hit it. All right, so in this segment, we're going to look at some of the amazing comments, the hidden gems that made the rounds. First, let me tell you real quick about what I see as the channel mission, which is to elevate members of the church by building bridges of understanding through fun and informative content. And second, help honest actors to take the church seriously by exposing limitations of critics and correcting misconceptions. We have some Pachyderm members, Jacob Wardle, Curious Madcat, Stripling Boomer, thank you for being here. Actually, I don't know if you guys are here, but thank you for being part of it. And then our Mammoth members, we have one, always searching for further light and truth, or light and knowledge, excuse me. So thank you for helping us promote the mission of the channel. But here we go. Here's some of the comments. First, Joshua Moulander 8153 says, if you ask 10,000, you'll surely be able to cherry pick answers that you can attempt to debunk. I've never heard a Book of Mormon claim that didn't end up being a big nothing burger. Latter-day Monty Lion. Monty Lion and the Holy Grail. What do you think?
Oh, gosh. A big nothing burger, eh? I mean, there's
Beyond Burger? Are we talking like the fake meat? I'm just kidding.
I mean, well, I mean, in this case, yeah, it might as well be Beyond Meat. Because there's something to be said about the Light and Truth letter, right? If anybody has read the Light and Truth letter, I think they would come across this section that while we haven't necessarily found the cities yet, there is a definite downward trajectory as the supposed anachronism.
Yes. And while you're cutting out here,
was that?
Oh, you cut out again. I guess in the chat.
I hate this rural internet.
No, that's fine. I'm curious though. Like maybe it's just on my end, and like if the chat could let us know if it's if they're noticing you cut out too. Oh yes, he's cutting out for us too.
Yeah, it happens on TikTok too. So
okay.
It's not just here.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say,
yeah.
speaking of, I'm glad you brought up the Light and Truth letter because I actually think the inspiration for making this video was at some point I was watching, it's probably Word Radio actually, with the Light and Truth letter guy. Oh my gosh. I know his name. Why am I forgetting his name? It's because IQ drops in half when you're on live.
You're on the spot.
Oh my gosh. What is his name? Light and Truth letter. Someone's going to tell me. And I'm going to feel like an idiot. Austin 5. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marvelous Wonder. Thank you. Okay. At some point, when I think he was talking to Word Radio about kind of his experience out of the church, and he said the one thing is outside of the church there are no good answers for the Book of Mormon, and I think that's just been spinning in my head. And it's like, I'm a scientist. I want to put this to the test. So it's kind of like this hypothesis. Now, is this like the most scientific way to go about it? No, but it's arguably the most entertaining way to go about it. So thank you, Austin 5, for that inspiration. Thank you, Word Radio, for having him on. Because, yeah, I got that inspiration. But, okay, hold on. Going back to the comment, before we lose the comment here.
Right.
The funny thing is so I didn't cherry pick any of them, I would argue. What I did in the video, I couldn't respond to all of them because there's a ton. A lot of them repeated themselves. I literally just took the ones that were the top voted. So the ones I talked about, the two main ones I talked about, were just the top two that voted. The third top one was what's in the thumbnail, Joseph Smith's butt. And so I talked about all of them without picking, and I did that on purpose. So I didn't like mean to pick any in particular. The burden of proof ones, because that came up like I think a few times, and it was something that I kind of wanted to talk about. I did talk about those, even though they weren't like the most upvoted. So I guess you could argue that I cherry picked there. I don't know. Do you think I cherry picked?
I don't think you cherry picked, honestly. Like, if you have to, it has to go both ways, right? If they're trying to say that we cherry pick, then they do it times 10 at the very least. I mean, there's no way to go about that.
Okay, Finn the Human C7S says a naturalistic explanation for the Book of Mormon takes more faith than believing it was divinely inspired. I hearted that one. I think that was the top comment on the video, so we had to put it in here.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty good. I think that's right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd say faith, but like there is more evidence depending on what you see as evidence. You know, this goes back to epistemology, right?
Yeah.
For the Book of Mormon being divinely inspired, if you believe beyond naturalism. But I think you have to presuppose some things. But I guess the point he's making here, even if you just have naturalism, then you should conclude you have no idea where it came from.
Well, and the thing is that a lot of the times these folks just argue like atheists, right? I mean, this is exactly
Yeah.
I mean, this guy very well could be an atheist, but he very well could not be. But I mean, the same argument can be applied to the Bible. But I would honestly say too that it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a person of belief, regardless of whatever belief that is.
Well, I think that's what this person's saying, because they're saying it takes more faith to look for a naturalist explanation than it is to just believe it. You know, so it's agreeing with what you're saying.
Okay, it's kind of a double-edged sword there, yeah.
Okay, here's kind of a long one. So this is because I want to get some of the negative ones in here. Let me get through this real quick. Your entire claim here is pretty disingenuous and contains one fallacy. Your mistake was saying that once you've read it and there's a binary action, you must take in which you decided whether it's true or false. And now there's a burden of proof on either side of that coin, but you're wrong. So in the video, real quick, I did talk about the burden of proof, and I said, some people were saying, oh, we don't have the burden of proof, which is funny because they said, a lot of them literally said, we don't have the burden of proof, but it's obviously false, which is funny because now they have a burden of proof. We'll get into that. Anyway, so I kind of mentioned that, like, even if you're not saying specifically this is 100% not true, if you are, like, familiar with it and like know it very well and you act as if it's not true, my argument is then you are making a claim, maybe not with your words but with your action. Anyway, the binary action would occur at the moment a non-member is presented with the Book of Mormon and told that this is another testament of Jesus Christ. The binary action forced upon the subject by the presenter is now whether they choose to believe you or not. Okay, so they kind of get in, I've read this one before, they get into this idea of like presenting it to a new investigator, which I think is not in the correct context. So this video specifically is talking about ex-members, right? Members who you would assume believed at one point in the Book of Mormon and were choosing to live it. Almost you could say that the skeptical view for those that are within the realm of the church is to continue believing as the skeptic view. But then when you leave, you have to have reasons for leaving. And I don't think... So first off, I like there's kind of some nuance here, and I think Trevor 99999, funny name, we are talking past each other a little bit. But if I were to say something, Trevor, I would say in this context, the people who were saying we don't have the burden of proof, in their same comments were later saying, but it's false, or at least heavily implying so. And everyone who was on the Ex-Mormon subreddit responding to that did have a burden of proof because they are implying heavily that it's false. Even those who tried to hide behind the burden of proof. Anyway, I'll pause there. Where do I go wrong? Lion Monty.
I don't think you really went wrong anywhere, to be quite honest with you, because the entire thing here is that it honestly is a binary decision. You read through the Book of Mormon, and this is the thing. Like, look at the introduction that Joseph Smith, the statement from Joseph Smith, the testimony of Joseph Smith about the Book of Mormon. He says that anyone who reads it and abides by its precepts will grow closer to God. That's the test of the Book of Mormon right there. And that ultimately is tied into Moroni's promise. And so that I think is the thing. You don't just read it and then pray about it and then boom, all of a sudden you got a testimony. It doesn't work that way. You got to read it, live by its precepts, and pray about it while you're living by its precepts.
Yeah.
That's the thing there. And this, I think, and that's where the binary choice and the binary decision ultimately comes down to. Did you read it? Did you live by the principles that it teaches? And did you pray about it at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
If still you come across saying that, oh, no, it's not true, okay, fine. But 9 times out of 10, I would say that if you do that, you're going to find out that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, and there's a reason for that, right? Like the precepts that are in there talking about the people who truly did live in this hemisphere also lived according to the gospel of Jesus Christ and the law of Moses. And that is the test that we ultimately have to do. We prove that by living by its precepts. What does it teach? And is that bringing us closer to God?
So Travi IX, funny. Oh no, the other guy was Trevor. Never mind. The comments like you got the
Trav9.
Trav9. Trav9 says there is no burden of proof. It exists. Which let's stop there for a second. That's an interesting thing to say because you're right. We do have the Book of Mormon, and not only do we have that, the manuscript, both the printer's manuscript and the original manuscript, which we have, I think, about 28% of or so, and we have a lot of the printer's manuscript, align with the narrative of it being dictated and translated to a T, which I think that's some of the most underrated evidence for the Book of Mormon. Like, we have these stories, these accounts about Joseph Smith dictating the Book of Mormon and the way it's described, and then you look at the manuscript and it fits that perfectly. It's written out exactly how you'd expect, with like the corrections where every so often when it's like a respelling from Oliver's handwriting, when the new ink is dumped into the I don't know, what do you call it? The quill? I don't know. I'm just using Harry Potter language.
Well, I mean, I suppose they used a quill pen. I don't know if it was actually a quill.
And so, anyway, the point is, I think that's an interesting point. Like, it does, like, we have something, so there's no need to prove that we do have something. Now, I will say that, I think what they're trying to get at is the burden of proof in the discussion here is, like, where did it really come from? Because, I think, as we pointed out, the evidence, if you're just looking at like how it was written out or whatever, aligns very much with the dictation process. And so ultimately the question goes back to, was this actually a divine translation from golden plates? So let's keep going with the question. How is it possible? The burden of proof comes after you choose an explanation. I think that's not a wrong way to think about it. Like, once you choose an explanation, but like the thing is so you don't have a burden of proof if you legitimately stick to your guns and say you don't know, right? Like if you're like, I don't know, well, that leaves the possibility for it being a divinely translated work. So you have to leave that door open if you're truly agnostic to it, if you're truly a skeptic, if you truly don't want a burden of proof. But as soon as you say, it definitely wasn't written, or it definitely wasn't translated by Joseph Smith, even though that's a negative statement, it's still a positive claim that has a burden of proof associated with it. As soon as you get into like you say, the absolutes, or not the absolutes, but like the explanations, then I think you're right. Then you have to have a burden of proof, even if that explanation is something that it's not, as opposed to like something that it is, if that makes sense.
Right.
Anyway, any more thoughts on this one before we move on?
Well, yeah. So I mean, like I do like what he says here. I mean, the there is no burden of proof. I mean, it exists. I mean, we can hold it in our hands here, but I think the issue here is
the gold plates, they're gone.
Yeah, the gold plates are gone. But the thing is, though, is that like we could say that about pretty much anything. I whenever I have discussions, especially with atheists, I will often like, okay, is the moon real? It's like, well, yeah, of course. How do you know? Have you ever been there? Did you ever, handle the moon rocks up there?
But they can
Right?
see it.
But they can see it. How do we know it's not a projection?
Could be.
It could be, and that's the thing. Like it takes just as much faith, even though we have the testimony of three people from 1969 who went up there, did the press circuit, said they were up there, they brought samples back.
It was staged. It
That's
was
the
all
thing.
on a stage.
See,
In
here's the deal. It was all directed by Stanley Kubrick, but he's such a
middle of
method director.
Nevada.
He insists on set. Yeah,
That's why they
Stanley
don't want us
Kubrick-
to find Area 51, because that's where the stage is.
No, Stanley Kubrick is such a method director. He insists on shooting on location.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Boom. All right, let's get into the next one. Carter Brown 9695 says entertaining video. Honestly, I used to agree with faithful explanations of the Book of Mormon origins, but the critical narrative I have found more compelling as I dug in. Neither side can be as simple as they often make it out to be. I respect this comment. This person does not believe in the Book of Mormon. They still said my video was entertaining, which I respect, and they just said, hey, honestly, they're not convinced by the faithful explanations, and they think the critical narrative is more compelling. All right, well, they seem to think there's more evidence on the fact that it's not true. Interesting. They didn't lay out any of it here, so we can't really comment on what that actually is. But I just, I wanted to put this one out here because it's one that is against kind of like, my point of view of the Book of Mormon being authentic. I might have to pause for a second because I think I locked my wife out and she's coming back from Young Women's.
Uh-oh.
So...
Well, let's see if I can. If
you
want me to, I can try to carry the show.
Here, I'll just hit this beatbox and we'll be right back.
Break time.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry about that. We're back. Anyway, did you have any thoughts on this? You were gonna say something before I had to cut you off and run away.
Yeah. So just kind of looking at this comment here, the without going into the like.
Oh no, you're cutting out again.
Criminy.
Without going into the.
Yeah, without seeing the arguments that he gives, I can't really say like whether or not it actually can hold any water. I will say that I won't say all, but I will say the majority of the arguments that I've seen against the origins of the Book of Mormon have to deal with how consistent they are. How consistent are the accounts of how the Book of Mormon came to be? And honestly, when you line them up side by side, try to line up the timelines. The ones that are more, shall we say, faithful or friendly to Joseph and its divine origins are a lot more consistent with each other than those that are against. And that's what I've found when I lay them out side by side.
Yeah, Kurlam Theory says, I can't see how anyone can doubt with Hugh Nibley's 112 lecture series on the Book of Mormon. There's so many parallels to real-world cultural practices. Mm-hmm. By the way, love the name, Kurlam Theory, though Kurlams and Kulams were no match to Ether's elephant in the Book of Ether, let's be honest. Anyway, but, okay, so I actually just watched, from Mormon Book Reviews, he put a video out on the Church of Jesus Christ, the Bickertonites, where Josh Gailey did a presentation on the Book of Mormon. Awesome presentation. I really enjoyed it. I think he has so much more he could get into. I want to read his book. I haven't read his book. So Josh Gailey is the one who wrote the book. I'm pretty sure about the evidences for both the resurrection and the Book of Mormon. and amazing stuff. So I want to read his book. If anyone's read it, let me know what you thought of it. But I love that we have friends that also believe in the Book of Mormon. I really like evangelicals. I love their love for Jesus and everything. But then you have this other group, the Bickertonites, who are like our evangelical cousins who also believe in the Book of Mormon. So it's like a double love, you know. They got the Jesus thing going, which is awesome, but then, you know, they got the Book of Mormon. So I like it. Oh, hey, Ben Christensen. He's a buddy of mine back from BYU. Cool. He's going to watch it later.
Right on.
All right. Let's keep going here. Okay. This person says, Mr. Dave KC. I think he's commented a few times. He's one of my hate watchers. Love the
Gotta love those.
There's this other guy who's like always, I think he's a hate watcher. I've seen him on like Word Radio and stuff too. He's just hate watches a lot of content, which is pretty funny because I like this stuff. I'm like, I don't even know if I have enough time to watch as much as he does. Anyway, this guy says, you're obviously not that interested in serious critiques. The Ex-Mormon Reddit is interesting, but there are some very good academic resources that have seriously addressed the issue. You mean like the CES letter? No, I'm just kidding. I hope he's not thinking of that. The Ex-Mormon subreddit has no control over who is actually a part of it, and there are many non-LDS that have been LDS on it. Have you been kicked out of it or something?
They have high censorship in that. Like I don't go on Reddit as much as I used to anymore. I think the last time I did, but like, yeah, I got kicked out of Ex-Mormon subreddit after it was discovered that, oh, hey, I'm an active believing TBM. Nope, out, gone. Like, jeez.
Oh, because
Okay.
you admitted that's the reason I had to hide behind John Paul Chulinga for the video.
See, that's the thing, though. I mean, I kind of take Nephi seriously when he says that there's a certain place that liars are going to be thrust to. So, I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, I think everyone in some sense is playing a character online.
in some way.
And so, you know, it's just, I can't do the experiment without you like creating a person. So
That's true.
you can fight me, I guess. I don't know. I thought about that a little bit, and honestly, I didn't have any problems with it. But anyway, maybe some people disagree, and I thought maybe some people would disagree, but I didn't really see any of that. People like Dan Vogel. At one point, someone was like, "Are you related to Dan Vogel?" I was like, "No." Oh, do you know who it was? It's the guy who the Last Dispensation one time said that I either look like or sound like Dan Vogel. I'm like, thanks. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if you ought to take that as a compliment or an insult.
Yeah. Okay, Word Radio says, you're not stupid if you believe, you're more intelligent, and your epistemology is firing on more cylinders than the idiotic, cynic internet doubters. Cynic internet doubters aren't edgy either. 99.9%, they're depressed, pathetic, and self-absorbed. Yeah.
You're a gentleman and a scholar, Carden. Thank you.
You know, he's right, though. The epistemology part, in particular, I'm talking about, the epistemology firing on more cylinders. That is correct, because you're willing to accept more evidence than someone who just like takes naturalism, for example, which is funny because you have to assume a bunch of things anyway. Everyone has to assume virtually like the same amount of axioms at the beginning. And then some people assume things that just limit their ability to see things that I think some of which is clearly true. For example, you know, morality, right? You can't use science to show that what Hitler did was bad. And so, but if you're strict to your epistemology in this naturalistic atheistic sense, and the true atheists are strict in their epistemology, then they can't say that that's objectively wrong. They just have to say that they don't like it. So I respect people who stick to their guns, but a lot of people, especially probably in Ex-Mormon subreddit, kind of play this game where they're atheists, but they're not at the same time. They're also like woke. And like the weird thing is some of those points of views really can't even go together because there can't be like this morality. So some might argue that they're agnostic, you know, but they're definitely not agnostic when it comes to the Book of Mormon because, you know, they do that whole thing of like, oh, we don't have to prove that God exists, but he definitely doesn't kind of a thing, you know. At least
Yeah.
that's what they were saying about the Book of Mormon. Maybe I'm going a little too far by saying they
Well,
do the same
it's the
thing about
same
God.
atheistic arguments that the atheists who fight and rail against the Bible do. There's no there's no middle ground for these folks. But at the same time, I mean, like uh, folks like Dan Vogel. I mean, there's some things that he writes that like okay, I can kind of see where you get there, but again, it's like he takes a lot of the same approaches that Fawn Brody does.
Yeah.
Trying to psychoanalyze everything that Joseph Smith does, and it's like okay,
Well,
dude,
and
the way you it doesn't work.
well, if you've listened to me before, I'm kind of, I don't want to say anti-history, but I'm pretty anti-history in the sense that I hate this idea that like people like feel like they know exactly what happened when they weren't there, and they base it off of like this terrible evidence that's like in any other scientific field would just be like, no, you can't say anything about that. I made a whole video about that with Dan McClellan, which I mean, Dan McClellan, he's trying to be open to mistakes, and I've seen some of his stuff where he's like, he purposely has to use language in a way that's easier for, I guess, non-scholars to understand. And my
Right.
critique is that language is too soft and it makes it sound like there's certain things there that aren't. And I think you would
My
agree with that. But
my I don't think it's necessarily anti-history. I think it's more credentialism that
oh,
is the
I'm the
trap.
one. I'm saying I'm
Oh,
anti-history in the
yeah, yeah,
sense
yeah.
that
No, and like I'm saying, I'm not saying I don't I would hesitate to call it anti-history. I would say anti-credentialism because
oh,
the moment
you're
these
you're
folks
saying
start,
I'm anti-credentialism, not
yeah,
actually
I
anti-history.
am too.
Well,
So
I don't know. I don't want to be anti my own credentials in one sense, but I will say, like, okay, like the further back you go, the worse the problem becomes. The more recent history is a little bit
mhm,
better, but like, there's a reason. There's a reason. There's channels like 132 Problems, which we're going to talk about coming up in
yeah,
breaking news because that channel is no longer. So stay tuned. But there's a reason that those kind of channels actually exist and can convince people because the history is muddy enough, just muddy enough, where there's some level of ambiguity where you can pick which things you want to tell your story. Even in science, this happens when there's like way more data to back things up. But in
right,
history, it's like the thing about history is it's completely biased of what survived. You have a completely biased data set that you're looking at because what survived is not random. What was written down was not random.
mhm,
And so you're picking from a biased data set that's extremely sparse, by the way. Like as opposed to getting like minute by minute data, which is some of the stuff that I have worked on in the past. You're getting like once every 1,000 years or something. Like especially when you're talking like biblical times. Anyway, and so even like 200 years ago, this starts to become a problem though, less so. So like I think we can have a better idea of like Joseph Smith's time than Christ's time, for example. But like
yeah.
when the problem I have is when people talk in such absolutes about history, which anyway, how do we even get into this? We were talking about Dan Vogel, which by the
Dan
way,
Vogel.
Ward Radio says I challenge Dan Vogel to a debate with 3 different historians and crickets 3 out of 3 times. Wow, 3 times. Third time's the charm? Apparently not, because he didn't come on. Interesting. Anyway, so Dan Vogel. Anyway, sure. Even the Tanners have done very extensive work that is serious. So, Mr. Dave Casey, when he says I'm obviously not that interested in serious critiques, I don't know how you could draw that conclusion from a silly video that I made that I think was fun and entertaining. And I don't know, that's just like, I don't know, maybe I'm interested, maybe I'm not. I don't know how you would determine that from a video that just happened to be about Ex-Mormon subreddit. So, but
Right. The
anyway,
thing is
go
that
ahead.
even the Tanner's points are ultimately ridiculous. Their magnum opus is something that's used by even evangelicals, and yet it's all a bunch of quote mining. It's all a bunch of, if you saw my 3-part series talking about the hermetically sealed vacuum chambers of some evangelicals. That's exactly what the Tanners do. Like they find these quote mines and they package them into these nicely vacuum sealed chambers, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, see, this is what the Mormons believe. Beware the Mormons. This is what they really
Isn't that
believe.
so frustrating when it's like, this is what they really believe? It's like, no, I'm right here. Like, why don't you ask me what I believe?
Like
No, this
I
is what you believe. You believe
get
in That
Can
guy.
you talk to me instead of about me?
Yeah.
Really, please?
Even so, Jacob Hansen had a great debate against this guy about the Trinity. I don't know if any of you saw that. We talked about a little bit about it last time with Hayden Carroll. Awesome job. Jacob presents this beautiful presentation about the LDS conception of the Godhead. Wonderfully done. And I'm excited to see where this guy's going to go when it's his turn to do the cross-examine. And he doesn't address anything that Jacob said. Instead, he's like, well, let's talk about what you believe, the infinite regress. And it's like,
It's so funny.
okay, there's some members who believe that, but like, why are we talking about that? Like, why aren't we talking about anything that Jacob said? It blew my mind because I thought he did a good job in leading up to that point. So I thought this is going to make an interesting conversation, and it fell completely flat. Word Radio says, I've never understood why people respect Dan Vogel so much. LOL. Hold on, it scrolled up. The beach nearest my house is loaded with dudes like him. 50-year-old surfer potheads trying to convince you it's all a conspiracy, man. It's all a conspiracy. Yeah, I've watched some of his stuff. I don't know. I have biases too, and I like to watch the stuff I'm interested in. And that means I'm mostly watching Word Radio. I find them very entertaining. I've really enjoyed Kwaku on there, who's been in some hot water recently. But I love when Kwaku goes on there. I think he brings a lot of spice.
So we did miss a comment from L.
We did?
Going up a chat from L, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay, here we go. Here.
Yeah.
Sweet super chats. As soon as someone says see yes letter, I immediately note the person is a lazy, what does that say? Ultra crepidarian troglodyte.
Yep.
Nice. Yes, thank you for the super chat.
Crepidarian troglodyte.
Yeah, you're
As
giving me big
only
words.
L can put it. L matriarchy, everybody. If you're on TikTok, go follow her. She's awesome.
Oh, nice.
So,
I'm guessing, is she YouTube channel too?
No, she's exclusively on TikTok.
Okay. See, like that's a good thing because there's a lot of anti on TikTok. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. At least I'm a little concerned about the future of TikTok. It might not be here forever unless Trump delayed it for a while. But anyway, so you might want to consider the transition, and it worked out for some people. So I guess you can stay with TikTok until it's time to jump. But like Dan McClellan started on TikTok, and now he's doing great.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's part of the reason why I'm making the shift over to YouTube as well.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I mean,
it is hard to do multiple platforms, so especially when you're building an audience. So I would suggest if you're starting off, just stick to one until you have like a solid foundation. Yeah. Last one right here. Hey, Pachyderm, check with Stephen Pinecker of Mormon Book Reviews. He has a fairly cohesive, naturalistic explanation. I believe you can watch his explanation on. I think he did a whole episode or episodes on Mormon stories about it. By the way, Stephen Pinecker, I've talked to him a lot recently. No, not a lot. We've had a few phone calls, long phone calls though. I like Stephen Pinecker a lot. I'm gonna be making content with him. We're working on something eventually. Who knows if that's ever gonna happen? There's like two things that we're supposed to be doing together. We'll see if it ever happens. Yeah, but in the meantime, I've really enjoyed talking to him. And he really has the ins and outs of all Latter-day Saint movements, the Bickertonites, the Community of Christ, the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints. Do you know him at all?
I've interacted with them briefly on Facebook, mostly through Jacob Hansen's Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
That's really about it.
All right. Okay, well, we're done with that segment, so now it's time for the breaking news. We call it the Big Ears Bulletin. If I can get to it. Run. All right. Number one on the breaking news. 132 Problems Revisiting Mormon Polygamy has erased, or at least put on private, all of her videos except for one that says thank you and goodbye for now. I actually first heard about this from you, Monty Lion and the Holy Grail. So do you have more insight on this? What happened?
I honestly wish that I had more insight on this. The only thing that I could gather based on what she says in the video, and she doesn't say it outright, but you can kind of get that there was maybe a long discussion with some of her priesthood leadership where a lot of the stuff that she was saying, like before she put all her videos on at least private, if she didn't delete them entirely, um, suggests that
Are we
she was getting in
speculating
hot
here, or
water.
do you know that
Wait,
she talked to?
I am speculating.
Oh, okay.
That's exactly what
Let's
it is.
just
I'm
clarify that, because yeah.
no. I'm
Maybe
not
she didn't. Maybe
speculating.
she
I'm
did.
editorializing.
Oh,
We'll go that way.
we'll get to the Salt Lake Tribune here in a second.
We'll get this out like a Tribune in a second. And they are masters at editorializing. But no, like the only way that I can truly say is in speculate is that her leadership finally said, you know what, enough is enough. This is either straight out apostasy or it's bordering on that.
Did you watch
And
the
we need
video
to-
though of what she
I
said?
did, yeah, I
Okay.
did. And like I said,
did she
didn't
say
it
anything?
explicitly outright?
Okay.
She never said it explicitly outright, but it almost felt like she gave the impression to me, and I could be off base. I'm gonna put that caveat right there. I could be wrong, but it almost seemed like she felt like she had a gun to her head. At least as far as her membership in the church is concerned.
Huh. Well, yeah, I don't want to speculate too much. I know she's had an interesting, rough life and history with some of the things that have happened. I watched some of her experience on Mormon Stories, and the first little bit of it, when we were just talking about her, was pretty interesting, and then you got into kind of some weird stuff after that, which was, of course, obviously all about polygamy. But, I hope it's not the end of her channel in the sense that, like, do I agree with the 132 problems? No, I don't. But like, she could maybe adapt it to be something else, which I think would be very interesting. I wonder if her audience would just hate her for it. Because, by the way, like, some of the most aggressive people online are the polygamy denier people. So I wonder how people would react if she were to, like, say, okay, we're not going to even talk about polygamy, and just, like, switch to, like, I don't know, more positive, uplifting, come follow me type stuff, which I think she could be really good at. And I think she would keep at least a portion of her followers.
Well, and the thing is that, like, to her credit, she is an excellent researcher. She is great at being able to pick up sources. In some cases, right? Like, there's obviously, like, we were talking about bias earlier and things like that. But I think she's good at pulling up sources that not very many people are able to find. But her beef with Brian Hales, and even when it came to, like, saying, like, okay, this documentation, yes, but you're quote mining, and here's the full context of it. She didn't really care for that. And from what I was able to determine, especially watching some of her other stuff, and even interacting with her in other places, or like seeing like screenshots of some of her interactions from other places, it was very clear that she did not really appreciate any kind of pushback at all. And I think it was very clear at that. And even then, like, Elle just put up a comment, like, she knows stuff, but there's facts, and then there's the narrative about those facts. And that's what she was essentially trying to push. She was trying to push a narrative about the facts that were there.
Yeah. And to some extent, we all do that. But I think the healthy thing is to admit that we have biases and things we bring to the table, which is good. I think there's a reason scientific papers should all have a limitation section, because you need to admit the limitations. But yeah, I thought that was shocking. When I saw that news, I was like, whoa, really? And it's true. Her channel is watered down to nothing. There are some interesting analyses of, like, the growth of her channel. I've actually done some of that myself with some YouTube data, where her subscriber count seems to be at best stagnant for the amount of subscribers, and seems to be potentially inflated. But anyway, who cares? As long as YouTube doesn't kick her out. She got 17,000 views, and which is a little low, I guess, for that subscriber count, but whatever. I guess it depends on the video, and this isn't her, like, main video, so anyway, it's not that big of a deal. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that's a lot of work to get to that many subscribers, even if some of it might have been inflated. Who knows? And I don't want to, like, take away from all the work and effort that she put into this channel, which was a lot. And so I hope that even if she decides to, even if like she's getting away from like the revisiting polygamy stuff, I hope she's able to still use her channel and maybe rebrand, or at least take her following somewhere else. But yeah, because I think
I think a rebrand would be great for her, honestly.
she may not
I
want
just
to, I guess, but
yeah. I mean, but the thing is though is that like if the speculation is accurate and that her leadership did talk to her, because there are plenty of people even within the comments that were kind of agreeing with what I was saying, that last video seemed very performative, like her leaders were watching.
hmm.
Um,
I haven't watched it yet, so I'll have to check it
yeah,
out.
but the thing is that like with this, it almost seems like, you know, because if you watched any of her other videos, she was railing against, Section 132, which okay, fine, but at the same time, she's also like it morphed into going against temple ceremonies and the
Yeah,
endowment and things in there. Like
it's kind of
it
hard
was
not
getting
to, I
pretty
guess.
nasty.
Well, the thing that's kind of funny is, her channel that some might argue, and I'd kind of argue this, is kind of based out of conspiracy theory. Well, now there's a conspiracy about the conspiracy theory channel. Like, why is she being taken down? Who's throttling her? Who's silencing her? Who's doing it? Anyway, so it's kind of funny.
Well,
That
and
these
it's all ex-Mormon, anti-Mormon channels that are doing it, right? Like
they're doing
they're
what?
all like, well, no, I saw a post from Mormon Stories earlier where they had actually says the church is silencing Michelle Stone.
Maybe
You
they
have
are.
the
I don't know.
It's
No,
possible,
I
but the
don't think
thing is, I
they're.
highly doubt this came from the top. Again, I think it's
No,
more
yeah.
local leadership.
Well, even if that's the case, I think the right term would be an invitation of like, hey, we need you to stop this. Maybe there was, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't want to speculate. Like,
but like
I guess the
for
sense is there's freedom to do things, but there's not freedom of consequences. And maybe she was
right,
presented with some kind of consequences if she didn't.
no, she likely was. But
Yeah, who
I mean,
knows?
this is the thing though too, is that like, um, people can still view her content if they really wanted to. There's Google Drives and links to the privated videos. Like
Oh, are they?
there are ways to do that.
Yeah, but who's gonna go
Um,
through all that time to find some
you
random
would be surprised. She has some really adamant groupies out there.
Yeah, well, yeah, she has a lot of followers. A lot. It's funny because like the the whole group of people who kind of get into the conspiracy about Joseph Smith being murdered by within and anti-polygamy really love her stuff, obviously. But then the
Talk about
Mormon
conspiracy.
stories really like her stuff too. And I
Yeah.
think part of the reason they do like her is because she stayed in the church. And so, especially Mormon stories, when I was watching that with John DeLynn, he loves it when he can get someone on there who's like still in the church, but has like something that they struggle with or like don't like about it. And he wants to just talk about that the entire time and just expose, like, like, look, this person's in the church and they say it's a problem. So obviously it's a problem, like to him, it like gives them more credentials if they're still a member. And he
Right.
was just loving it, I felt like, when they were talking. Okay, interesting there. Let's hit this thing from the Salt Lake Tribune that I saw going around. I was able to read some of it before Salt Lake Tribune tried to put me behind a paywall. I don't know if I had like one opportunity and then it disappeared. So I read some of it. And then when I went back to get into it, it's like, you have to pay it now. I was like, wait, I didn't have to pay the first time. Like, what is this? Anyway, Eli McCann, revisiting the surreal day I resigned from the LDS Church. Quote, I had no idea what this letter was supposed to say. So this poor bishop began Googling anti-Mormon websites for instructions. Monty, did you read any of this, or do you need me to summarize?
I have not. I think you need to summarize this.
All right,
'Cause
yeah.
I haven't read this article
It's
yet.
pretty much your typical story. So back in, I think this took place in like 2014, this person, Eli McCann, decided, and I didn't read the whole thing. I was able to skim through most of it. Decided that they were going to leave the church, and I think they, have pioneer ancestry and all that. So Eli decides to talk to the bishop. The bishop was actually quite nice about it, and as you can see from here, was trying to help them write the letter that was required for them to fully get out of the church. And so Eli was like, I don't know what to write. And the bishop's like, okay, like, I don't know. He's trying to look things up. And then Eli like wrote out basically like he said in weird scriptural language. I don't know why. I think he's trying to like imply that he was so brainwashed he was thinking in like scriptural language. That's what I took. Maybe he wasn't meaning that, but he's like, I furthermore declare that the Spirit hath done that thou art not the church. Anyway, I don't know what he said. I can't remember. Anyway, it was weird. And he like showed his bishop, and the bishop's like, okay, yeah, I guess that's a good start. You know, I think they'll get the gist of what you're trying to say. Anyway, and then when he went to sign it, the bishop was like, okay, go ahead, sign it. And he kind of had like this giant Book of Mormon, and he was going to sign it on like using the Book of Mormon as like like something hard to write on. Yeah, anyway. And when he went to go sign on it, he kind of paused for a second. He was like, my goodness, this is the Book of Mormon. You know, I had ancestors that literally sacrificed their lives for this book to come over here and escape persecution for the teachings that are in this book. And I'm about to just sign a paper that says that, like, you know, I don't think it's true. Like, and long story short, he basically thought, oh, that's kind of funny, and signed the paper, and there we go. So I'll pause there. Let's get your thoughts, Latter-day Lion. Hopefully I told the story well enough.
Yeah, I found it. I found the article.
Oh,
and
good. Did I do a good job, or did you skim?
You actually did a pretty decent job here. I mean, the at least from what I'm able to see here, and I for whatever reason the paywall's not on mine, so we'll see how long that lasts
until you refresh, and then it will, yeah.
Right, but like, it's interesting. I mean, he throughout the entire thing, it looks like he's a gay man. You know, married.
Oh,
to another
I
man,
totally missed that part.
Yeah, and so
that's probably a big part of the story.
Well, from the looks of it, I think it is. But from what I can tell, I mean, yeah, from the other parts that you summarized, it was pretty on the nose. Where, you know, when he finally did do all this,
we'll say
the fact that the bishop laughed.
I don't know. I just took it as the bishop's trying to be nice and non-confrontational.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the bishop left later too. But Eli, we're sad to see you go, even though it's been, what, 10 years? 11 years? I think it was 2014 or so.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It's kind of like, don't we need to question like why something like this is getting published in the Salt Lake Tribune? Isn't this like is this really like Salt Lake Tribune article worthy? I guess. Like what? They're funny.
If we're being honest here, yes. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, the Salt Lake Tribune started as an anti-Mormon rag anyway.
Then they've transitioned. So Gordon Monson, he writes a lot of articles in the Salt Lake Tribune, and he used to be a sports radio broadcaster, and I actually really enjoy it, or used to enjoy when he was still doing that, his sports radio stuff. And he gets into a lot of heated stuff about the church. He just recently published one about, does the church really need to make their steeples so high on the temples? Is it worth it? And of course, all his stuff is behind the paywall, and I'm not paying to read that crap. And in some sense, you know, like they're trying to enrage people to get more clicks. And I didn't really think this one was that, but I'm kind of surprised that people like even cared to read something like this. It's kind of like, whatever, you know. Everyone who leaves the church could tell the story about writing their resignation letter. It's like, okay. But yeah, any last thoughts?
I mean, it's always sad to see someone go, you know, whether, you know, regardless of whatever stage in life they're in. I truly do hope in the case of Eli that, you know, he does find happiness and true joy. You know, whether that's in or out of the church. You know, I'm not really in a position to say like, oh, these folks just really wanted to leave the church to sin. That's not the case at all. People leave the church for all sorts of reasons. But to say that all of the problems in your life after having left the church was because of the church, I think is also just as disingenuous. We need to be willing to recognize and take responsibility for the decisions and the actions and the choices that we make. But I mean, at the end of the day here, given everything that we've talked about, the internet is a silly place. And I think we need to be just as much silly back. So
And that sums up the thesis of this entire live stream. We talked about Ex-Mormon Subreddit. We talked about the comments people left on the YouTube video about it. We talked about what Salt Lake Tribune is putting out there. It all is a giant heap of dog mess, as I think Whoopi Goldberg would put it. It's a giant. It's just a place to feed what you want to hear. Even AI does that too. And in that sense, the internet can be 100% a false god and a false prophet. You know, you find what you want to hear, you get into the echo chambers that you care about, and this happens on both sides, on all sides of any issue. People and the algorithms don't help out, right? Because they're trying to give you what you want, and so they're kind of feeding into that echo chamber. And I think some of this was exposed on Ex-Mormon subreddit. When you ask about the Book of Mormon, people are just like, it's obviously written by Joseph Smith, without any good reasons. It's just like, okay, you've heard that said so many times, you're just going to believe it. So thank you for summarizing the thesis of today's live stream. The internet is a shallow, dangerous place, so you might want to learn to swim, even though it's shallow. So you can just stand, I guess. But anyway.
learn to wade through the waters,
Yeah.
as murky and questionable in color as they are.
Well, Monty Lion and the Holy Grail. I like calling you that for some reason. Thank you for joining me. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about the Latter-day Lion? Oh, I said it.
Yeah. I am obviously here on YouTube, Latter-day Lion, TikTok, Instagram, and on X, all Latter-day Lion. I post weekly videos, lately debunking a lot of evangelical comments and even some church culture type stuff that has kind of cropped up a little bit, with a bit of an edge. I think you guys will have fun watching my content. So, I have a lot of fun. I think you will too.
Nice. And you seem to be growing, so keep up the good work as far as growing your reach and your channel. So thank you everyone for tuning in. This has been the Ethers Elephant live stream. We'll catch you next week. I'm planning on doing something, so stay tuned. Also, I have a really fun video coming out that you'll want to subscribe for. So I'm actually partnering with someone. I don't want to. No, I'll say who it's with. Sit Down with Sky. If you've checked out his channel,
Sky's awesome.
It's an awesome one, and I have a video coming out with him that I think you're gonna want to see. But until then, thank you so much for watching.